Hello and welcome to Let's Get the Skinny. I am so excited to introduce my next guest, who has quickly become quite a celebrity among my 1010 client community, thanks to a recent group that she was in. Amie has an incredible way with words, and she shared her 1010 process so raw and vulnerably with my insider community that I'm really, really thrilled that she's willing to bring some of her process publicly on the podcast today. And I'm really positive that this is going to be a thought-provoking and possibly painfully relatable episode, not only if you struggle with food stuff, body image stuff, but are also on a path of ditching the diets, but are feeling confused and scared about kind of what comes next. So you're also going to get a chance to learn about somatic, which is the work that Amie does as well as a somatic practitioner. So let's start with maybe sharing a little bit about your relationship to food and your body before pre-1010.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Kiki, for that intro. I want to say I'm so excited to do this. Like just before we jump into that loaded, heavy topic, I just want to say, like before we start, that this program is one of my favorite things that's ever happened to me. It's been so life changing. So yes, let's begin with my relationship to food and my body before 1010. Yeah, was like a disaster and just a lifelong. It's so crazy how much of a difference I feel since starting in September with you, and it's only December. It's the end of December, compared to my lifetime of like a fraught relationship with food and my body. So I don't even know like where to back up to, but I think maybe it's best to just start with like my recent history with food in my body, and like that led me to finding 1010 and being willing to take the plunge. So I went through a big phase of, I mean, I wasn't really like, there's so much noise out there that it was hard for me to tell like what my problem actually was with food in my body for a long time. So I'm thinking of my late 20s and how I kind of like been steadily gaining weight to the point that as an adult I've spent most of my life like overweight or even in the obese category according to BMI, which is, I still don't put a lot of stock in that, but still. And, I wasn't happy. Like, I was not happy with, like, the way I looked or the way I felt or with my relationship with food, but I didn't know where the problem was. There's so much noise out there. It's so confusing. And yeah, I think at the time I was on like a therapy journey, a self-love journey, a somatic therapy journey, and like in my late 20s I was just trying to accept my body and love it for what it was. So I did that. I used to try to heal that. I used to paint like paintings of myself naked to try to like find some like self-love for the way that my body looked. But I want to say like I still wasn't it didn't, heal me. And I think that for everybody who is attracted to your method, I've started to really see thinness as a symbol of something deeper that I wanted, right?
Yes. And what is
Like
it a symbol of? Because I've tried to
Mhm,
describe it, and sometimes people get it, and other times people are like, "Oh my goodness, how dare you?" So I'd be curious to know, like, when you think of slimness, or when you see someone who's thin. Because if you don't mind, I'll just share very quickly.
mhm,
Before, when I would see thin people, I would be like, "Oh my goodness!" Like they either have this incredible, they've won the genetic lottery, or
mhm.
they must be doing all of these things, and wow, they just have so much more discipline and willpower, and that must be so great that they don't even like food, clearly, right? And that's why they're thin, right? Or they're just really good at doing all the things. And it would be triggering for me because I'd be like, oh my goodness, they're better than me, they're stronger than me. And now I see it as like, wow, that woman's so relaxed into her life. Like that woman like loves herself deeply no matter what, and is so like unapologetically like her in every moment. So I'm curious as to now what do you see? How has that shifted for you?
Mm. Yeah, I'm so glad you're saying this. I was just saying this to my therapist yesterday, like about, because one thing that you do is unshame people for wanting to be thin. And it's so important. And I think, of course, with the drugs out there now, like we're seeing that people are admitting, like, yeah, I want that. But it is a symbol. Thinness is a symbol more for like a deeper thing that I think I was always longing for, which is to answer your question. I think it's maybe the ability to like prioritize joy, pleasure, desire, what I truly want, who I truly am in my life.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of the kind of lingo that you use in the program, like, because that's something I would want listeners to know is like in the program, it's almost like you're being deconditioned and deprogrammed from all the junk in society and given a new, it's like a whole, you've developed like your own language to describe this new state. It's very helpful, like to use this new language. It's very therapeutic, but it's about being on your path, being present, being connected to yourself. And I think that's all the things that thinness represents that I was truly longing for. And we get confused. This is so human of us to like focus and fixate on the exterior and what we think that would give us, but it's really the journey to getting that we want.
Yes.
Or
And I think
it's
I
mhm.
think that's a really great bridge too, because you did get to thinness in other ways, right? At other periods of your life.
Yes.
So maybe you could talk a little bit about that. Like, what did that thin? Because maybe if we just look at you now, you could technically look fairly similar to how you looked years ago, doing something completely different. So how is it different if it is?
Yeah. That is a good perfect segue. So, yeah, my late 20s, it was still unresolved, and then basically my story before 1010 is like I got into a period where I was so stressed at my day job, because I had been there too long and I needed to quit, but I was terrified, and I started like I was emotionally eating every night, like night after night. It was terrible. And I ended up my boyfriend and I were like, "This has to stop." Like, we're ordering Chinese food every night and drinking beers on the couch. Like, it was because of the stress of and my fear of, like, what was gonna happen. So, we started ordering a meal delivery service, and just to put the rails on things a little bit, and then that meal delivery service happened to have a keto option. And those were the ones that looked the best, but I knew that keto was kind of high fat or whatever, so I was like, "Well, I kinda want those, but I don't wanna be eating such high fat," because I had all these diet rules in my mind. So I was like, "I guess I'm just gonna go on keto." And yeah, so that's kind of what happened that led me like, it was a surprise that it just happened by accident. I went on this like keto meal plan essentially, and I immediately started dropping weight like crazy. Like I had no intention of losing weight. I just wanted to kind of like get a little more control over my insane emotional eating that was happening. And then I ended up losing a bunch of weight, and through that process, I became completely addicted to it. So I got into the whole thing where I was like, I thought I was eating healthy for the first time in my life. I and I had experienced so much freedom with the keto thing that I was doing because I finally had some boundaries around how much I was eating. And yeah, like, but I also obsessed. I was calorie counting, I was macro counting, I was eating only 2 meals a day very rigidly at certain times. I would intermittent fast, I would walk all day. I would walk for like 2 hours every morning, drinking coffee the entire time. I feel like I was like just jacking my nervous system up. And I did lose weight. I lost 50 pounds. It was crazy, like, within a couple of months. I think by, like, 8 or 9 months, I had lost, like, 50 pounds, and people were like, "Whoa, what the hell?" But I was in under this delusion that I was being really healthy because that's what they tell us is healthy out there. Like, counting your calories and, like, being active and intermittent fasting, all of these things are praised, and
Was there fear when you were losing the weight and got to this certain aesthetic? Was there fear of like, oh my goodness, like people, I don't know, people are going to find out, or is this going to stop working one day, or like anything like that?
Yeah. Like, because as I was losing that weight, I also started binging on sugar randomly. Like, just because I never even cared about sugar before. I was always kind of like a mac and cheese binger, like, or like a mac and cheese overeater. And I didn't really have a dessert problem. But once I started restricting it on keto, it was like I still had an emotional eating problem, but it was masked with this extreme control. So, of course, I was afraid. And I would be in this cycle of like, doing really good on keto, being perfect, dropping weight, and then I don't know, being overtired, not having slept, being stressed, and then binging on a box of cereal, like something completely unappetizing to me in like a normal state of mind. Yeah, and then I would say, so what, what was it like to be thin then? It was like this extreme exercise of control, obsession, like tracking, like mentally tracking. I had a notebook where I wrote everything down. Fear when I went to the grocery store, anxiety when I went to the grocery store. It was like even being around carbs, it felt like being in a minefield of like temptation.
Yeah.
It was like, it was a disaster for my nervous system. Also, I think because I had no carbs in my system was like running on coffee, adrenaline, cortisol. And I think it actually probably took me longer to lose weight on keto than it feels like it's taking now.
And
It's so interesting.
I remember you saying that when you were on keto, it was almost like, yeah, you were thin, but you felt sort of inflamed, or, this sort of almost like skinny fat, which is exactly how I felt when I was very thin, but had very disordered eating. I never actually felt thin, even though I knew that I was physically very small. I always felt fat. I always felt bloated. I always felt like, ugh, like I never wore a two-piece, even when I was severely underweight, because I just felt like, ugh, I'm fat, right? And I think that fear, and whether it's a restriction or whatever, it creates that feeling. And I don't know about how you feel now, but you definitely look like just so hourglass and just beautiful, and just that iconic womanly thin body. And I don't think that that's a coincidence.
Yeah, I don't know if we talked about this, but I've certainly been talking about how when I lost weight on keto, it did this weird thing. Like I'm at the same weight that I looked back at photos of myself from losing weight on keto versus now. I'm at the same weight and I compared photos. More of my storage got taken from my hips when I was on keto. And that's where I store a lot. My body really stores a lot of my hips and my thighs. Probably people listening will relate to this. If you have this kind of pear-shaped figure, there's a lot of shame in our society around having fat there, even though it's like the most kind of like womanly, feminine shape. And I know I've suffered from that. But this program has been so healing for me around it because yeah, I think when I was so to get back to the keto thing, like I I as I was losing weight on keto, my body tapped into those stores. And for me, I'm starting to think of that storage as like the backup storage. Like that's the vault that we only go into in an emergency. And I think because my body started to freak out after we were having no carbs for months on end, it started tapping that. So I had excess weight up here, but it was going into my hips, and my figure started to look more like a prepubescent teen as I was losing weight. Whereas now I'm at this same point and I look like a woman. Like my body's pulling a lot from my rib cage, my waist, my shoulders.
Yeah.
So I have this like very defined like figure on top, and then I still have like the kind of vavoom going on down like in my lower body. And I don't know if it's going to stay that way, but it's just different. My figure looks really different. My waist is like tiny compared to my hips right now. And it might change, but I feel like the difference now is that as I'm releasing, my body actually feels safe. So it's not tapping into the backup storage right away. And my feeling on it is like if I do want to release that storage because maybe I want to be feeling more connected to that part of my body, I feel like the work is going to continue for me. I think maybe my body might kind of say to itself one day, like, oh, maybe we don't need all of this. Maybe we want to hang on to whatever's necessary for like making a baby or whatever pleasure, like how much is pleasurable for me to have down there. But if there is excess I'm carrying, I think one day my body's going to be trusting enough of me because I listen to it that it might say, like, actually, I think we can start to let go of this too. Like, I don't think we need to hold so much here.
And I love that you said that because it is a kind of symbiotic relationship. It's a dance in terms of, because I want to clarify, it's not bad to have excess. It doesn't mean, oh my,
Mhm.
I don't look at people that have excess and, oh, they have a problem with food, right? Because some people don't mind having excess and that's fine, right? And it also, I think that applies in terms of like the degree, right? And I think I'm almost allowed to say skinny because I'm not, 90 pounds skin and bones, right? That isn't my goal aesthetic. I've never really wanted to be that way, right? And I think you're absolutely right in that. And I see it with my clients. There's different forms of thin, and it's not that excess is necessarily good or bad. It's sort of what works for you and how you want to feel and how sort of connected. Not to say that if you have a little bit of excess, you're not necessarily connected, but it's just there's just this inner knowing of when you know, like, okay, this is the shape that my body feels best at for where I'm at right now.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah, and like, I mean, there is a lot in the culture that's very healing about having the body for the season of life that you're in. And I'm into that. Like, I really do. And I feel like I'm in my mid 30s. I want to be a woman. I don't want to look like a prepubescent teen.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I also feel like, but I want to feel more connected. I mean, one thing I'll say is like how this food stuff has opened up more of my process in life is like I have this amazing connection with my stomach that I've never had before on this really like subtle level, and I want that same connection with my pelvis and like everything going on in there, like with my sexuality. So I feel like my body is going to change the more I keep connecting with it and learning more from it. And yeah, your program has given me the space and the subtle tuning in that I needed to even to begin that really subtle level process.
And that subtle tuning in, I want you to speak to because so often when women start with me or in a program, they're like, oh, I don't know hunger. I don't know satiety. I'm completely disconnected from self. And did you feel that way going in, or did you feel like going in, you were like, oh, I'm super tuned in to like the specifics around my hunger and satiety and all that jazz?
Yeah, no. I came in being like, first of all, so much fear mongering about hunger,
Hmm.
like in our culture.
Yeah.
I feel like a big part of the healing in your program is re-educating about hunger, like re-educating about everything. It's almost like you come in, you throw everything out that you've ever heard, and you just listen to what Kiki says, get your brain reprogrammed, which is the best was one of the most healing parts is just receiving a different set of programming and not listening to anything outside of like the way that you're framing things, but also how it lands in my body and how I feel when I try to put some of the language into practice. So the hunger thing, I had no idea that there were shades of hunger. I didn't know that there were shades of satiety. I even think like fullness and satiety are different, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, and just even knowing that and I you know, what am I trying to say? Like there's such a range in there and I didn't have any of that when I
Yeah.
came in.
Yeah. And I think that's good to hear because for some women, I get the impression, and I felt the same, that it's almost like, oh no, there's actually just something broken in me. And that'll work for other people because other people can feel that, but I can't. Right. And I'm curious to
Mm.
know what specifically brought you to like, okay, I'm going to do this 10-10 thing. Like maybe Kiki has something because clearly you had tried many things. You were also on this journey of like, okay, no, I'm going to accept myself. And that's oftentimes a lot of the women that come in, they're sort of like, yeah, I did the intuitive eating thing. I don't hate myself. I'm not binging like crazy. Like, just so you know, I'm like, I'm not a disaster. but also maybe I could use a little bit of your help.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for keeping me on track because I keep getting excited about different things. So keto, I did lose 50 pounds, and then and then the rest of that story is I couldn't sustain it. My body rebelled. I was having acid reflux. I was bloated beyond belief, and then I lost my period. And it's really the acid reflux that got so bad that I eventually, like, one day just lost it and ate oatmeal. Like, because
Great.
everything I looked up online about what should you eat for acid reflux was all carbs. It's like bananas, rice, oatmeal, and I was like, I just knew, like, something is wrong with what I'm doing, and it was so hard for me to let it go, Kiki, and it was devastating. And let me just really drill in this point because was at an absolute rock bottom when I finally pulled the trigger on the program because I spent a year. I really talk about it this way, like a year and a quarter, yeah, like 12, 13 months in the wilderness searching for like what happened because I gained all the weight back as soon as I went off keto. And I will say too, like, the re-education around hunger in your program is so important because I had extreme hunger after keto. Like, something happened where my hunger was like insanely intense and I was binging all the time and it felt insatiable. So that does exist. I know what that's like, but I think it was only after like a year and a half of of essentially like starving my body on keto. So I had a lot of fear around hunger when I came in because I had experienced that. And it wasn't the first time in my life because I've had a lot of disordered or out of order eating. But yeah, I gained all the weight back. I was miserable. I looked at my camera roll from a year ago and it's filled with screenshots about dieting, about like obesity. It's like I was searching for an answer. Like, why did this happen to me?
Yeah.
Like, what the hell happened? I did everything that people said to do. I went on this diet that doctors, prescribed for people. I counted my calories and my macros. I did everything and my body rebelled and I'm right back where I started, like carrying all of this excess. I'm miserable. Like, I don't feel in control I feel like I'm like, why can't I figure out what is happening with my own body? I went to an eating disorder nutritionist who basically just kept telling me I needed to eat more, even though I was rapidly gaining weight. And when I told her, like, I was concerned about the rapid weight gain, she just acted like, well, I don't know what shape your body's going to take. And like, maybe you need to do the work to figure out why you care so much. And like, I felt totally like no one could help me. The internet was a nightmare. And by the way, everyone is confused. It's like there are articles in the Atlantic with people writing in such a confused way about like, we don't understand why dieting and exercising doesn't work. And how come these medications work?
Yeah.
And like, maybe it's just a genetic problem or a brain problem. Everyone's so confused. It's so crazy. I was reading it last night and being like, what alternate world did I step into where this is so clear and easy?
Yeah. That's exactly how I felt when it clicked for me. It was like, wait a second, why has everyone lost the plot? Because nothing that I teach now, in 1010 is, maybe I shouldn't say this, but is that revolutionary, right? As you I know that when I received the information, it always just felt like there was this inner like, yeah, that feels true. And yet no one is saying it, but it's so obviously correct, right? And so, what was it for you that, was there a moment that you felt like you surrendered, or do you feel like there was, a process of sort of surrendering into it? And I know that sounds so cliche, but I do feel like there has to be a process of surrendering in order for this process to work. And I think that's why you were so successful so quickly with the method, because you completely dropped victim mindset. Whereas I find that for clients, it takes a little bit longer. It's because they're still clinging to this like, no, but like there is this little thing broken that I do just need to keep tweaking or whatever it is, or there's just resistance to just accepting that like all of that other stuff is complete bullshit. So why do
Yes.
you think it was so easy for you to just surrender?
Okay, I'm gonna talk for, like, a little bit of a long time here because this is really important to me. So I just want to say that when I was gaining the weight back, I do somatic therapy. And one of the things that we do, like to move energy in our body, is we hit and we yell. If there's anger, that's one of the ways that we process anger. And I remember with my therapist, I see him virtually, but I was hitting my bed with my therapy bat. And I was just saying, like, I don't care how I feel. I just want to look this way. I'll do anything. I'll do anything just to look the way I want to look. I don't give a shit about how I feel. Like, I will do anything. And I was just releasing that because that was my like negative intention. And that was a thing that ruled me for most of my adult life. And it's funny because I never looked the way I wanted to look, only on keto, with this extreme discipline and control and like obsession did I get to that point. But I had to hit a rock bottom with that way of living. I expressed it fully in order to let it go. Like, because it wasn't the way. And I spent months wandering in the desert looking for an answer. I was like, this doesn't make sense. Why did this happen? Why why is everybody making it seem like I have no control over my own body or no agency as to what happens with my body? And I spent a long time on the internet looking up research on obesity, looking up like what people do who have lost a lot of weight and keep it off. And like there's so much noise and junk out there still about like only eating whole foods, and there's just a million things that don't work. So I got to a place, and I feel like there were temptations along the way, Kiki, to like the surrender that you're talking about, because I almost fell in the trap of going to the gym 5 days a week and lifting heavy and eating 9 million grams of protein that you make fun of, which I think is hilarious because I almost fell into that trap. I remember leaving a voice note to my friend being like, maybe that's the way to be healthy. Maybe that's what I should do. And she was like, yeah, but Amy, doesn't that kind of seem like the same thing?
Yeah.
She was like, I don't know. I've looked at these girls in the gym and they don't seem well. They seem like they're just as obsessive and rigid and restrictive and like kind of like it's their entire life. And I thought about, and I was just, and I feel like I had to go through all these like temptations, like an Ozempic. My mom was on Ozempic. Like, there's that out there as a temptation. But I just had to keep being like, I had to keep saying no. No, I won't accept that. That can't be the solution. There's got to be another answer. It's not a drug. It's not going to the gym 7,000 times. And I feel like as I said no to all of those temptations, finally I manifested you. And you were saying the thing that I've been longing to hear. And I will like tell listeners like the things that really made the difference for me, because first of all, when I found you, I was like terrified of you because you, you come off like so intense sometimes, which part of me loved, but a part of me was like, this woman is
I
scary.
know. Sometimes I get off a TikTok video and I was like, was that too much? I don't care. Yeah. I have an
I
alter
know.
ego, a persona, and she's a crazy bitch, and we love her.
Yes. Oh my God, that's so true. It's true. You have a public facing persona, and then when you get the internal persona, it's very different, just so people know. Ugh, I'm out of breath. I'm so excited. Okay, hold on. So the things that I heard you say were you can enjoy your food and enjoy your body. Ugh. And I was just like, that sounds true to me. That sounds like what no one else is saying, because everyone else is either saying you can enjoy food, but like your body's going to end up wherever, or you can enjoy your body, but you have to double down on your control, like controlling your food. No one ever said, like, no, pleasure is your birthright. And it's about maximizing pleasure, and you deserve pleasure for nothing just because you're alive. And here's how to maximize pleasure in your life so that you can enjoy food and enjoy your body.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I still remember when Shirley, my coach, who has a system called Energetics, which I'm very much inspired, and she teaches me a lot, and is included in my group program now because she's just so wise. I remember her asking me. We were talking about sugar, and it got to the bottom of me just kind of realizing, no, I can't have sugar. And it was like, why? And eventually it was like, yeah, because I don't believe that I just deserve pleasure for nothing. And I think it's so interesting you describing that story of like hitting your pillowcase or like your therapy bat. That's so funny. I need one of those. And it was this process of, you know what, I'm going to release that. Okay, it's being skinny at all costs, right? And I don't care how I feel. And isn't it funny that the process that got you there was literally the exact opposite?
Opposite.
Because the only way that you can get there is actually being like, I don't even care how I look. All I'm going to care about moving forward is how I feel. And I think that that's a nice bridge to maybe talking a little bit about your work and perhaps either not necessarily how 1010 has influenced your work. I'm not going to take credit for that, but in terms of it's influenced how you feel, and perhaps there's an even deeper connection to your work and the work that you do. And I think that it's knowing the little that I do about somatic therapy. I think it's quite complementary. So I think it would be interesting for people listening to kind of understand that and hear your perspective on that work.
Okay. Let me think how I want to bring them together. Well, okay. So I found somatic therapy because I needed it. I was not in my body for a lot of my like adult, like, my whatever. And I spent 10 years in talk therapy before I found somatic therapy. And yeah, I think so many of us get caught in like our minds and we're not really in our bodies. So I needed to do many years of body therapy for me to release a lot of like sort of pain from my childhood, early developmental trauma that I have. And yeah, the way that I do that, I finally eventually studied in it and became a practitioner of this modality of somatic therapy called core energetics. So core energetics, I guess, yeah, for people listening who have never heard of it. Not a lot of people have heard of it. It's kind
I've
of
never heard of it.
yeah, it's like everybody knows somatic experiencing. Everybody knows like I don't know IFS, which is not even somatic, but yeah, core energetics it kind of like has descended from the Freudian lineage. There was all the psychoanalysts kind of became obsessed with the mind, but there was a group of Freud students who split off and because they were like, hold on, the body and the mind are connected, and that is really important. You can't forget that. So this whole group of somatic people split off and were kind of working in the background while everyone was obsessed with psychoanalysis. And then, of course, the brain chemistry theory came and like everybody got obsessed with like taking drugs to fix their problems and everybody forgot about the body. So now that we're kind of shifting culturally back into it's almost like, yeah, that feminine energy that we've forgotten about, the energy of being and being in the body is coming back into our cultural forefront and people are remembering the body and like oh it's so important to be in the body and that's where this core energetics lineage descended from. It came from bioenergetics. The guy who founded it like worked on I guess Lowen and Paracas were the bioenergetics founders and then John Paracas split off and created core energetics when he wanted to add a spiritual dimension to the work. So, what I do is somatic therapy where we move like emotional energy through the body in order to process trauma that's stored in the body. And there's like a spiritual lens to it. So, it's like we're not just regulating our nervous system, we're actually trying to like take what we've been given in our life, like the traumas that we've endured, and move them so that we have more access to like our essence, if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, it does,
Okay.
and that sounds incredibly complementary to the what I teach in 1010. And I'm curious as to do you think that it would be of benefit for or maybe I'll phrase this in a different way. Do you think that you could have had benefit from doing that work in tandem with 1010?
The thing, so this, here's what your program gave me that my somatic therapy did not give, couldn't give me unless I had your program. And I'm just like trying to think about how to phrase this. I know how to process my emotions. I know how to feel. What your program gave me was deprogramming, deconditioning from what society told me so that I could get the mental noise out of the picture. And two, permission to feel on a subtle, subtle level. Like that it was okay for me to tap into these places in my body and feel on a subtle level. Like, because I think honestly, I think my somatic practitioner has his own stuff with food and conditioning from society, so he couldn't take me there. I needed your, like, the path that you walked to, like, be able to unlock that for me. And now that that is unlocked, my somatic work is popping off. Like I said, like, part of what's been opening up for me is more of my sexuality. Like, I'm working a lot more on my sexuality because I'm so connected to my, like, gut. Now I can work on this mysterious region of my pelvis, and now I'm like interested in unlocking like what's happening down there. So it's been extremely complimentary. And I would say, I think one of the reasons I was so successful in your program is because I have tools to process the emotions. Because I think for, I'll just say for me, like, I came to your program like a free person. I had already done a lot of the work in my with my therapy to free myself from, scarcity things. Like, I work for myself. I have total freedom in my life, and I was still miserable because I didn't have this kind of authority
Yeah.
in connection to food in my body. So once your program helped me get that, it's like I can just take off because there's no limit in my life. I think for some people, and this would have been me if I had found your program in my late 20s, if I had put my food in order, like like we learn how to do,
Yeah.
I would then have to turn around and face a huge mess of places I was so unhappy and trapped
Yeah.
and not what I wanted my life to be. And I would need something to help me process that. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Bingo. And I see it so clearly now, right? And it was almost scary at the beginning when I would start doing this work with clients, because for some it was like, "Oh my god, everything is great. Kiki, that's fine." Because it's almost like you learn how to feel, you learn how to absorb your life. And this was how it was for me. And then you like absorb your life and you're like, "Wait a second. This is all great." Like, of course, sometimes like weird shit happens, whatever, but for the most part it's like, "Oh, I don't have to be so tight all the time. I can actually experience my life. There's nothing wrong here." And
Yes.
then, as you say, then sometimes we put life in order, or food in order, life surfaces, and then you're like, "Oh God, I'm
Mhm.
living a lie. I need to get rid of my husband. I don't like where I'm living. My job sucks." And then it's like, oof. And then yes, it's kind of like, okay, well, we've put food in order. Now there has to be things that change, unfortunately. Fortunately, right? Because it's like
Yeah.
we want to remove all the buffers that are disconnecting you from you, that are preventing you from being on your path. And I think for you, it was such a beautiful process to witness, because you were already on your path, but it was a struggle, right? And it was like, and you weren't able to absorb the joy that of your life, right? And then so it was like, oh wow, this is so nice. And so I guess, what would you, as a, because I know we're over time and I don't want to take you forever, but I could talk with you forever. What would you say to someone who is fearing like, oh, but I don't want to try another thing, or perhaps it's like, oh, this feels like it could be kind of disordered, like they're talking about hunger, and this woman is thin and beautiful, and like, oh yeah, it was like only 50 pounds, like, maybe there's some resistance to kind of like, will this work for me, and is this just another diet that's being pretended to be all spiritual? Like, what would you say?
So to be real, I would say you can make this program an eating disorder if that's what you like, if that's what you want,
Mhm.
but it's not. Like, it's you have to, I was at a place where I was like, I will not accept anything other than healing at the root.
Yeah.
And that's what this is. It is healing at the root. If you're messing around making it an eating disorder, only you can know that. But that's not what we're being taught here. We're being taught connection with ourselves, authority, autonomy, agency, choice, and you choose how you use these tools. So, I mean, and I'm a person with a big disordered eating history, and it's my choice whether I let this be disordered or whether I let this be a connection to myself, like a gradual unfolding of empowerment, or whether I let this be a messy, another trap. It's really not. If you are ready to heal, like, I said to myself before I came in, like, this is going to be the last time and I'm going to really enjoy it because I only get to lose this weight one more time because I this is going to be it. And it's been so like it's allowed me to love my body so much. Like sometimes I put my hands on my body and I just feel like I have this understanding. Like I know why you instead of hating my body, I have this relationship now where I'm like, I get it. I know why you are holding on to this. My my vow is to show you we don't need to carry all this anymore. Like I'm listening to you, I'm following you. So that was how I came into it. And yeah, I would ask people to get really real. Do you want to control your body? Do you want to not care about how you feel and just care about how you look? Go somewhere else. Get it out of your system.
Yeah.
When you're ready to truly heal, you can take Kiki's program.
I Amie is not a paid actress. Um, but if I could hire her, I would. Amie, where shall we direct women to kind of reach out to you in any way or follow you? I don't know your protocol. I mean, I'm a fame whore, but I don't know at the level of fame whore you're at.
I don't have any like social media presence for my practice because I haven't figured out how to do that in an authentic way as like a therapist. So my website though, if people want to contact me, is just embodiedhealingpractice.com.
Amazing that you're able to grab that site. Wow,
I
good for
know.
you. I will put
Yeah.
that in the show notes. Amie, it was so fun to talk with you. I feel like we should do another one. I'm like already excited for more chats. So thank you so much. And for those listening who are inspired, pretty sure at this point you know where to go. But my website is kikiathinnis.com and all the links to either join 1010, there's a DIY program, or there's a version which you can do in a live group, just like Amie did. And all of those details are on my website too. Thank you, Amie.
Thank you.